Here we go. Hey, we back. We made it. I don't want to keep like dating each of these, but this is three. We can call this one is three, no question. We back. For y'all who are watching, this is gonna look a little bit different because we life happened, and as much as we're going to always try and fight to keep and do these things in person as much as we can, sometimes just the context of life, and we're all in different ministry roles and in different areas. Sometimes we're going to have to do digital. Come on, thank God for technology, thank God for media. Yeah, so this one looks a little bit different, but we still going to get into it. Have a lot of great conversations. My name is George. I'm glad that you all are here. I'm gonna let my teammates, my friends, introduce themselves. I'm gonna see who jumps first. I'm gonna see who does it.
I knew that would happen. I knew it would happen. I would have called that. I guess I'm Steven, and that's Marcus, and we are the humble part of the team that don't feel the need to go first.
For explaining that for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're excited to sit on the Hill podcast, man. If you haven't checked out our first couple of episodes, we would really encourage you to do so. It means a lot to us. 3 episodes in. First one, we got to introduce ourselves. Second one, we talked a little bit about this topic of why creatives are leaving the church, which I think when we started this whole podcast, this whole idea was one of the main, a topic that we really felt inspired to talk about. And so we got to talk about it from like a 30,000 foot level, and it only felt natural for us to kind of continue to dive deeper and talk a little bit about a very sensitive topic when it comes to why a lot of creatives are leaving the church. And so, Steve, why don't you tell the people what we're going to talk about today? Yo, Steven, do me a favor, dog. I'm going to give you a little bit of on-screen direction. Yeah, so again, talking about money, I really do think this will probably be a multi-part series. We even just right now, we were kind of talking through some of the questions, and there's so many questions that we want to get to that I think it would turn this thing into hours long. So we'll probably break this up into maybe a few different things. And honestly, I would really love to even have an episode where we just talk with the pastor about this, because obviously there is there's one side, one angle to this, but then there's also different perspectives and different, kind of different, just angles of the coin. And so we're excited though to talk about it. We know we're going to try and be sensitive because we do know that a lot of you, everyone who's listening to this has different church contexts and backgrounds. I mean, again, we talked about in our last episode, but I'm part of a church that's a church plant. We are just over 5 years old. And we're doing really well and things are awesome and growing, but the finances are everything that we do. I'm thinking about finances and purchases we got to make, right? Versus, Marcus, you're in a different context and from a church that's much larger in scale, kind of a different part of San Diego where we live, different, kind of affluency. Different tax bracket, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? It's a little bit different. We're close, but not that close, And yeah, so like your budgets and your just your approach to stuff, I'm sure is much different. Steve as well too. So we're gonna try and be sensitive to knowing that not everyone's context is different. So we want to give blanket answers, but we just want to talk through this stuff and kind of give some context. Steven.
Doing great, bro. This is it right here, bro.
Yeah, bro. Come on now. I feel like I might not be able to just tilt it up just a little bit so I can make sure when you sit down I can see you.
Thoughts gonna be like
Yeah. Sit down. Look at you. Hey, friend.
yeah, you were literally
Crazy. Bro, that's even a thumbnail, bro. You were just like, hi.
ask me more questions, bro. Nah, bro, we really got to do a podcast like that where we're all facing different directions, but not at the camera. That would go crazy. This is how disconnected your church is. You're all going different directions.
This is what it's like when you're not on the same vision. Without vision, the people perish. I don't know why I did that.
You're is it the shoe? Heard.
Dude, that was crazy. Oh, is your phone in the shoe right now? Oh. Oh, okay, okay, okay. I was like, man, shoe be gone. Um, all right, y'all. Let's do it, man. Let's jump into it. So okay, all right, Steven. All right, Steve. So you good?
Thank God. He's rolling.
Lord have mercy.
Let's jump in. We have a few questions that we're going to go through. We're going to talk again. There's no right answers. I think we'll talk through a little bit of our own experiences and our own perspective. But we want to talk kind of dive a little bit deeper, specifically into like expectations versus reality. One of my old job I worked at, my old church I worked at, our pastor used to always say, unset expectations often go unmet, right? And so there's usually seems to be like a misfiring between expectations and reality. Sometimes it's because they're unsaid, it's because, or sometimes it might be other things. So when it comes to expectations and money and creatives, here's one that I think it'd just be great for us to kind of kick it off on is why do you guys think, why do so many churches want high level creative output without offering fair compensation?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's somewhat a silly question to me right off the bat because you're basically asking, like, every industry wants to pay the least amount of money possible to get the best possible result. So that part doesn't really surprise me. I guess it's we're with that being said, there's still, the demand gets met in the end, but in a lot of cases in the church, this doesn't seem to be the case. So I think that's really the question you're asking is why is there at the end of the day the unwillingness to do what's necessary?
Yeah. I think at times too, there's like a lack of understanding of what it takes to actually get that high level output and that level of excellence out of whatever you're doing, whether it be worship or through your live stream or whatever the tip top version of that output looks like. There's a lack of understanding of how much money and effort it took to get there. A lot of people will just point, I want to do that. And little do they know that was like so much investment uh, in terms of money, but also in terms of manpower and like the time to think about how we're going to craft this thing. So I think it's usually a lack of understanding that's where it all kind of stems from. And then it can go in a bunch of directions from there.
I think that's a good point. I think that's a great point. I also feel like, and I definitely want to come back around to that, but I think from like a just 30,000 foot level, just looking at reasons too. I think what's also very interesting is looking at kind of the group of guys who are leading, like lead pastors now, right? And so a lot of the guys who are coming into lead pastor role, they kind of cut their teeth on like a very entrepreneurial mindset and kind of the Gary Vee generation, or whatever the case is. And they have, I think, some like they're entrepreneurs, like Steve said, think about how do I get the most out of something, with little as possible, right? That they're trying to maximize every single thing, which is great, and especially when you're starting something or maybe you're in a certain area that's maybe kind of hard to operate. Like that's a good mindset to have. Um, but I also think that, like, again, thinking through like sustainability and growth and long term, like healthy sustainability is also important, right? And so you look at a lot of the kind of the younger guys. I think and also I think a lot of the younger guys who are coming into lead roles, a lot of them, I've talked to them, their leaders were very tough on them. And so a lot of them have this kind of like, well, when I started, I had to like make it on like $100 a week. And you're like, oh, okay. Like that's crazy. I'm really sorry for you. And that's real. Like I'm not like, and I think there is benefits to like learning to have grit and grime and make it work for sure. But it's kind of like always asking the question, like, well, does that always how it has to be? So I think it's very interesting, kind of seeing the generation of guys who are leading now and what shaped them and what's molded them. And I think that kind of like plays out to how a lot of guys lead now. Like even some of the guys now, like I talk to them and they're like, well, when we started doing creative stuff, 10, 15 years ago, we were doing X, Y, and Z. And you're like, bro, the industry has moved a lot. So, what you could get away with in 2005 and 2010, which was still great for that time, and it was innovative for that time. But it like the resources are different now. You know what I mean? And so people at that time could see it as a hobby and see it as like, oh, I'm just trying something out creative. But a lot of guys now who are in this space, man, they've invested money, they've invested time. It's not a hobby to them; it's a job, right? And that's just from a creative standpoint. Kind of same thing. I'm sure obviously with music, it's similar but different. But yeah, like a lot of industry technology has changed and moved things, and so you kind of like realizing that maybe the playbook they're coaching from is a little bit I don't say outdated, but it's just changed, and so helping them realize that's different.
Yeah, man. I totally agree. That mentality of having to get it out of the mud and walking to work uphill both ways for like snow. I think there's a lot of leaders, and to bring some. Yeah, right. Uh, but I think there's a lot of leaders to kind of bring some hope to this who, um, I know all of us who are in our positions, we experience that, but don't want to recreate that for our team. And so I think this will be an interesting conversation today on how do we help bridge the gap while teaching them the skills that come with walking uphill both ways in the snow barefoot. Uh, you still have like what do we have and how do we not recreate the same problems that we faced where we were like ripping our hair out and trying to figure out if we were trying to quit or not. You know what I mean? So
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think that there is kind of like this. It's just interesting to see from generation to generation, right? It feels like my generation that's kind of coming up and will be leaders down the line. They're trying so hard to not have to put that on their people, right? Whereas that didn't necessarily translate with the generation before. So it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. And again, I think there is benefit from having to prove and work hard and like, like there's a grind season. Like I love all of that. But I do think there's also a balance between if you have people in your spot that you can learn to trust and like, you know what I mean? They shouldn't have to always be proving it. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a proving season, and then there's like a hey, now you have my trust. Now let's operate from that trust, and again, now you're not having to get it out the mud every season. So, and that's hard. And I get like again, I've never been a lead guy. I'm really close to my lead guy. I've been around other lead guys, so I don't want to ever speak like I know what they go through. I can understand the like there is a need for a lot of those guys like it's a vulnerable position being a leader, and I can't sympathize, but I can empathize with that. Like, man, like it is tough, and you're always thinking about stuff that no one has to think about, and so you want to make sure your ducks are all in a row. I can totally empathize with that, and again, I've been around that to say, yeah, that's tough. But I think again, some of the stuff just comes down to trust. Like you should know that your team that's serving, they want they want to serve the mission, they want to serve the vision, they want to serve you. They're not trying to undermine you. And when they ask for more, or they want to be compensated fairly, or whether it's for a project budget for projects, whatever. Like them trying to also prove themselves to you at the same time, like that's a tough sled. That's a tough sled.
As you move up the totem pole of leadership, the tension of this question you can kind of relate to more of like the other side of this. And I think if we just change the wording of the question, it's not that far off from a really good aim of trying to be as efficient as possible with the resources we have. Instead of coming at it from a like, all right, we're trying to cheap our way out of this. It's like we're given a finite amount of resources, and the goal is let's be good stewards with those resources. And so I think what we're trying to say is in an ever evolving world of how we are doing ministry, we need to possibly allocate more resources to areas that have previously been untouched. And so instead of looking at it as a negative, look at it as a positive and a let's do this together. Because again, all of us have started, at the lower levels of church, and you feel one way about this question, then you start moving your way up, and you're like, yeah, I kind of get it of why we don't spend money on certain things. But so you're trying to be sensitive to all sides when everybody should be on the same page of ultimately it's how does everything we have serve the mission?
Right. Right.
That's great.
And I think so. I think what you're talking about right now, Steve, is really good. It's also I think there's a level about this that's self-awareness, and I say this not to hurt anyone's feelings, right? But I think some of us need to learn to be more self-aware of what it is that we're really chasing and who we really are. I think a lot of this also comes down to comparison, right? So the truth of the matter is like all of us who are in ministry, we're generally looking at other people doing ministry, because they inspire us, or we model certain parts of our ministry, our church leadership after them, right? And what inevitably happens, I'm gonna be honest, is you look at certain people who do things really, really well, and you start getting comparison. And so I think even from leads, even from people who are in leadership, see that, right? So then they put that expectation on their people. Well, I want to do creative stuff. I want to, write music and do production level like these guys. So now they're putting that on their people below them. And there's a level of self-awareness that it's like, hey, is that really your mission? And I think this is hard for people to hear of like, hey, like, I think the Bible talks about different parts of the body, right? And so, man, there are some people and their bread and butter is just leadership and raising up leaders. There are some people, man, their bread and butter, man, they, good friend of mine and Steve's boss, I can say this because we're good friends, but Christopher, right? Man, he is an apologetic guy. He's a teacher. It's their bread and butter. You have people who, again, from maybe a creative and songwriting, it's different. Like that's their bread and butter. Not everyone has the same thing. So sometimes we'll look at people and we'll be like, wow, look at this, and this is what they do, and we aspire to do that. And then we will try and not even maliciously, but try and shortcut our way to being them or trying to emulate them, and not realizing that that might not be your calling, and maybe it is your calling, but you do then need to make changes and shifts, and maybe changes in your culture to get that same type of output that other ministry, that other church is getting. And so I think there's a self-awareness. People, I do a little bit of consulting, or people will call me or whatever, and I'll just talk to guys, and I'll just be like, and people will be like, oh, how do we do this? How do we do that? And I'm like, hey, before we even get to the how, we need to figure out if this is what you're called to do, if this is what you're gifted to do. Sometimes people try and copy my pastor, Pastor Jeff, and well, how do we do what Jeff does? And I'm like, hey man, you gotta realize Jeff's just gifted at this, bro. It's not even a strain for him to think about this stuff. It's just who he is. It's who God has wired him and made him to be. If that's not you, then it's maybe unfair for you to have the expectation of you and your church and you and your team.
Yeah. It's so funny. You're making me think of, there's a pretty funny and viral clip of Matt Chandler talking about this, about Mars Hill. Why am I blanking on Mars Hill pastor? Mark Driscoll. Of in their heyday, they're blowing up, and Mark was pretty aggressive in the way that he spoke to his congregation. And if you emulate his style, you can get yourself in some pretty hot water quickly. Of Mark had a unique ability to reach his context, and it was very niche. And if you are trying that, you're more likely to just offend a bunch of people. And so, yeah, so there's just it's just the self-awareness piece that you're talking about is just hugely true. It's just not wisdom to copy someone, particularly someone who's doing something different that is reaching their particular context. There's principles that you can take of excellence in all camps, but like again, we're close, like we're friends and like close even in proximity, and our churches could not be more different. Every one of our churches is so different, and so it would be foolish based on the context of who's in each position and the leadership and the congregation for us to try and be carbon copies of one another. It's back to your point about many parts of the body. We all have specific purposes that we're trying to do. It's very easy to get lost in looking at the other parts and being envious and saying, I would like to do what they're doing, and it's just not going to work.
And I think the whole point of being a creative is recognizing that the things that make us different are what allows us to do things that are inherently creative as opposed to the person sitting next to us. So if I'm trying to emulate everything that I see, then I'm not really making anything new. I'm just, like Steve said, I'm creating more carbon copies, and people don't need more of the same. God created us individually to have, and he gave us each different gifts, and he wants us to utilize them in different contexts and in different spaces and in different ways. And so I think it's important that we focus on what is it that God gave me? And George, to your point earlier, if your calling is to do something similar to that person that you're seeing and you maybe are comparing yourself to, it's important to make sure that your heart and your head are in the right place and that you have the people to do it alongside you. Because you might be the church that wants to write a ton of songs and shoot music videos, but if you don't have any songwriters or any producers who shoot those music videos, then we're in trouble. You know what I mean? It's not going to come out the way that you want. And then that's when unmet expectations get out of whack, and church hurt comes from there real quick. So,
And I think to that too, like again, this is the stuff I've practically seen, is like, you know, when you're trying to emulate someone, you're trying to copy or whatever the case is, you know, you don't realize like all the years, like you just see the product, right? You know what I mean? So like you see the video, you go, oh, we could do that, not realizing that, man, there's a lot of videos or songs or whatever that they wrote that weren't good, and that would those years of, I don't even call it failure, but those tries that they had that didn't hits or wasn't amazing, that helped develop them to the season they're at now. And so we just live, especially with social media and everything else, man. We live in such a like microwave culture where we want so badly to have what they have, but we want it in real time. And so it's like, well, you know, that's not necessarily the case. And exactly to your point, it's like, and also, what does it take to get there? My pastor Jeff and I just had this same conversation a few months ago where we talk about some stuff that we want to do, and I said, well, why don't you go talk to them and see how big of a staff they have? And it was like, oh, this is how much staff they have, how much people they have to pay to get there, and how much resources that they put into that. And it was like, cool. So now we have a baseline. And not to say that everything is the exact same, but we have a baseline. And is that investment? Are we willing to make that investment to do this, right? And so you get real context, real information, real, again, even timelines of, yeah, they did that, and it took them 3-4 years to get successful. Are we willing to invest that much time? Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you going to put on me as a creative? I have to create what they created in 5 years. I have to create that in 5 months because that you know what I mean? Like, that's a real burden and an obstacle if you're going to put that on me. And I need you to know that that's a crazy expectation, right? And so I think when you're with your lead and your leaders and your leads and your lead pastors or whoever's making the decisions, it's like learning to have real, honest feedback and expectation and like self-awareness of who you are and what they're asking you. And hopefully, you have the level of trust to be able to like have pushback and feedback, and that can be hard. It can be hard to have, and I can really understand how hard it is to do that if you don't have that level of like, if you don't have that level of trust with your lead. But that conversation is crucial to have of like, hey, this is what you're asking me. This is what it's going to take for us to get there. This is what other people have to do to accomplish that. Like, I just want us to be on the same page about the expectation. So yeah, that's tough, and that can be tough. That can be hard. Um, but it is necessary. I think it's a really important step. Is that self awareness?
I think it just takes time. I mean, I think as we all grow as leaders, you start to realize what God intended you for, and you begin to walk in confidence in that. Kind of speaking to your earlier point, the Bible talks about trials breeding perseverance. And so when you've navigated the bad songs or the rough shoots or, the bad cut of that announcement video that everybody was like, what happened there? You've not that that helps breed perseverance into life for you. And then as you begin to do more projects, you're more than willing to get it out of the mud essentially because you've experienced that already. There's light at the end of that tunnel. It's not always going to be like that, but your skills got to grow. And God does that over time. It's not a microwave type situation.
Yeah, and I just think again with everything that goes on today with social media and everything else, I just think that we're conditioned to believe it happened overnight, and that's just man, you got to get that out of your culture of your church, um, especially because I think especially thinking about creatives specifically, like if we're talking about truly creating, like just like creating for results is not necessarily creating. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I get it. Like, we want metrics, we want certain things like that. But like, if we're talking about just like artistic expression, if you're chasing a metric or you're chasing again someone else's influence or someone else's platform, man, that's a hard like that's an ever moving target. Like even what was really cool or impactful 3 4 years ago isn't the same today, and so you're kind of putting you're putting a lot of your team in almost like a no win situation versus like, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do. Now it's still healthy to have goals and have expectations and stuff like that, but us creating isn't predicated based off of again trying to be someone else. I think that becomes in a space where you start to get the best art and like the best product is because man, we're creating from a place of this is who we are, this is what we do, not trying to be someone else.
Totally. I think it's also important that you work as a team to define what is best because that could be different depending on what the end game is. And so that's particularly again in this digital world, this is a really difficult conversation of like, are we talking about creativity in your local context or what you're putting out for the world to see? Like those are just very, very different things. And so again, what is your metric for success? You have to come to an agreement so that you guys aren't, ships in the night passing each other, and people aren't disappointed. So so that's huge. Is understanding what is the target? What are we trying to do?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Um, George, you kind of asked earlier, like, how do we navigate? Maybe you implied it, like being underpaid as a creative, and I'm sure all three of us have experienced that in one way, shape, or form. But you're in like a really cool context at your church where you manage a lot of the creatives. How have you guys kind of maybe you into that issue, but how have you navigated that in different spaces and like what does that look like for you and how do you avoid that in the context you're in? just kind of creating spaces where creatives are underpaid. We've been talking about expectations this whole time. So what is it like for someone in your position who's definitely more in an executive role now to help steward not only the resources of the church, but also in stewarding relationships, and you recognize when a job might be over the pay grade of the people that you have.
Well, and I wouldn't. First off, I wouldn't say we do this perfectly well. What I would say is, and this has nothing to do with me, is I'm just blessed to be in a context where my lead pastor values creatives. So, and because I've been in this space for so long, I really know creatives, and I know, like, okay, you've been in this for a couple years. This is probably what you charge, right? So I kind of like even kind of help preface some of that stuff ahead of time. And then I lead with a lot of relationship with guys, and I let people know kind of ahead of time, like, hey, this is like I need you to know, like this is an unpaid gig, this is a paid gig, and versus this is a paid gig, and this is what we have, and so I would actually say we probably underpay a lot of our guys, but because I fight for my guys heavily, and I try and almost be a buffer between the creatives and my lead guys of like, hey, I just want you to know that we've asked this person now X amount of times and we've underpaid them a lot. I just want you to know that. And so I'm an advocate for my team as best as I can be. But then what's great is because I have such a strong relationship with my guys, I feel like I do a really good job of never putting them in a position where it feels like they have to do it because it's their church. And that's hard because I get like I've talked to guys and it's like, well, and because there's this kind of this culture within church a little bit that's kind of like, hey, well, it's your church, so you should always do it and you should always serve and you should never be a burden to serve. And it's like, I get that, like, for sure, like it's an honor and a privilege to serve. That's one of our values here at my church. It's a privilege to serve. But there is a point too, where like, hey, you're asking someone, this is their job, this is their profession, and you're asking them to you know at a rate that might be harmful to them to continue, and that's an expectation for them to always serve. I don't know most of the creatives I know that love Jesus, love the church. They want to serve. They want to use their gifts. It's not like they're begrudgingly being like, oh, I don't want to serve. But so many of them have had an experience where once they've started to do that, the expectation is that you always serve and you should just do it for free because it's your church. And so there's a balance there that's like, hey, we gotta be we want to honor up, we want to honor down, and we want to honor all around. And so these creatives have made themselves available. They want to honor the church and serving. The goal for us isn't to take advantage of them in doing that, and so we want to honor them down and saying, hey, you have been faithful with little. There are times where I go, I'm gonna try and pay you your rate, or even sometimes more than you maybe would get paid in this role, because I really appreciate the time and effort that you have served and given for free, and use your gifts without expectation, right? But again, that's just kind of me knowing the world and knowing those guys and knowing, like, hey man, I know what it's like to have to buy $5,000 worth of gear. And so, like, I see guys, and I'm like, I know how much that gear and that rig costs, so I get it. Right? You know what I mean? Like, I get it.
I think that's huge, bro. The fact that you can be a voice for people in that position because you've been there, and you can relay that to uh, your leadership, and also kind of act as a liaison to your leadership by helping make decisions that will keep the relational equity up on your team. I think that's massive, bro. You said a lot, like the relationship you have with your guys is what kind of fuels a lot of the creative process, and also keeps them from being frustrated when a shoot goes long, or when things don't go the way that we expect them to. I think that helps a ton in avoiding some of the pitfalls that may come when you don't have somebody in that position. So, if there are people who are watching this who are at a church who do have the creative knowledge and experience it's important that they do their best in the most respectful way to like step in the gap for those people. Uh, yeah, and be an advocate and allow for those relationships to form, not just with you and your team, but I'm sure Jeff and a lot of the guys know each other because they're around so. But you were able to be a bridge to them, and so now they're not just doing it for George. They're like, oh, I know Jeff too. So if this thing goes long, I could trust him. I know he cares about me. I know he wants he wants what's best for me as well.
And I think a lot of this stuff that we've talked about, again, I know we're going to talk more about money and finances because it's a big part of it's a big equation, part of the equation of this whole conversation about creatives leaving the church. But I think a lot of it ultimately boils down to your trust level with the decision makers at your church. And usually, I mean, I know there's executive teams and stuff like that, but usually what it comes down is it's your lead guy. Jeff says all the time, I believe it, I've heard it all the time, but ultimately your church, your team, your staff, it ultimately almost always mirrors and reflects the heart and yeah, just the heart of your lead pastor, right? And so if you're a person who's a creative and you're again in that space in between, you're advocating for your decision maker, wherever the case is, you have to gain the trust of your lead guy or again the decision makers of your church and not to say that everything's always perfect, but you generally can again work through some of these expectational differences. You can help them understand the gaps. You can help them understand why finances, why you're asking for more money, why you need to be paid more. But you can do all of that from a place of trust and communication, and ultimately trust is built up through communication, right? And so sometimes that means having hard conversations. Sometimes it means respectfully, having pushback and disagreement. But again, helping them understand, like, hey, this is what you're asking to do. This is your expectation. Here's what it takes. It's not that I don't want to do that, but I need you to understand what you're asking of me or what you're asking of the team. A lot of times these guys, these exec guys or lead guys, they have expectations, they have desires, they have vision and ambition, but they don't necessarily understand what it takes, and they don't understand why should I have to pay a creative, 75, 80 grand? Well, because, and then you walk them through that. Again, not from bitterness, not from frustration, but because, hey, this is, what it takes is the area we live in. This is the gear, this is equipment, this is the expertise, whatever it is. Like you just have to walk through that, build communication and build trust. And sometimes what that means too, when you build that communication as trust, is you hear no from them. And man, that's a whole podcast in and of itself. that's a whole nother episode right there, man.
I think leaders sometimes don't know how much they set culture. Like obviously they understand they're in charge, but they don't understand that like everything they do permeates into the entire fabric of what everybody's doing. I think if there was one church that I've seen, the pastor just so happened he was very high energy, like to an extreme point where everything was super fast, high energy, to where if you were to like click their songs, they did about every song about 10 BPM too fast. It was that extreme of the pastor was so energetic and it permeated so much into the culture that everything they did was that high energy, fast pace. Of like you're impacting everything at such an extreme level. So just be aware as you're making those decisions that you're impacting everything around you in the culture that pertains to it.
For sure. And I think once you understand that from a holistic approach, it makes a lot of these conversations, I don't want to say easier, but it does make them much more simple. And again, you can learn to trust and have that conversation. So I think again, this is a multifaceted thing. I think even just around the idea of money, there's at least 3 more episodes we want to do kind of around this topic. I feel very confidently that the people listening to this podcast have a lot more that they want to hear or share or have different opinions about. But I think
probably also something there of like we could probably share some dumb tax that we've paid in the early stages of life in the money. I was thinking, man, how vulnerable do we want to get? Like, do I want to throw out there just how dumb does that get? But yeah, there's probably a lot to be learned in that area.
Yeah, kind of closing thoughts and maybe just a minute each. What do you guys hope that people listening to this can hear or can take home practically from?
Lack of resource doesn't have to be a hindrance to your creativity. Um, YouTube University is a thing, man. And I think also we talked a lot about relationship in this episode. Get around people who are doing it at a high level and be willing to spend the time working alongside, sometimes underneath those people to grow your craft, so that you can learn the ways where we don't always want to circumvent the need for resource. But there are times where you got to work with what you got and you want to know how to best do that. And getting around the right people will help you get there.
Man, I'm trying to think. The thing that came to mind is relationship first. Like, make sure that you are building those bridges to your leaders and other team members, and that you're getting priorities and goals in order. Because it's very, very easy to burn yourself out quick and burn those bridges when you're not all on the same page. As I said, I just think that like that's more important than the actual thing that you're doing and how good you're doing it. Like that will come with reps and effort, but set that foundation up where you have those relationships built, that you know you're all in it together, and create a safe space for you guys to share the gospel creatively together.
That's good. Yeah, and I would just end with saying, creativity is a vulnerable space, and so like money is a vulnerable conversation. And if you can't have that conversation with your lead guy, then it's probably going to be really hard for you to have a great creative relationship anyways. And so I really learn to have these conversations. I know they're tough. I know they're uncomfortable. Whether, again, when you're asking for more money or just more for the budget or whatever the case is, like I understand all of that. But man, if you can't learn to have that conversation with your decision makers, you're probably not going to, make it in the long term anyways, because that's a vulnerable conversation that like, if you can't have that conversation, that reveals a level of distrust with your decision makers, anyways. So, examining yourself and then with your leads of like why we can't have this conversation, learn to have it, and then if you can have that conversation, man, that level of trust will carry you through anything. And so, yeah, that's a skill set that creators have to learn, leads have to learn, and through it, man, we'll be able to make stuff that glorifies God, raises the church up, and inspires others, which is beautiful. Right on. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in for this episode. Yeah, like I said, the little bit different format today, but we're excited to keep connecting with you guys, man. You can find the podcast on everything: Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. And man, we're excited to get back in a few weeks or whatever, and jump into topics about this. Peace.